So this is our New Voices, New Perspectives panel with Mary Guo, Tara Black, and Jem Yoshioka, and they'll be talking about their different comic styles and audience and amazing things. If you have a question for them, they'll be alive for the live questions afterwards.
At the end.
I've run out of words to say.
Yeah.
Go to slido.com, put in ComicFest NZ to ask the questions. But here we go with the panel.
Enjoy.
Okay, hi, I'm Mary Guo. I'm a concept designer and illustrator. Comic is kind of like my hobby, so I do on the side, making small things time to time. You can find my artwork on maryguo.com.
Hi, I'm Jem Yoshioka. I'm a comic artist and illustrator, and I do communications on the side, so that's full-time paying the bills. And then I have been working mainly making webcomics, but I'm about to sort of start to approach making stuff in print again after a big break. Oh, and you can find my stuff online at either gemshed.com or you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Jem Yoshioka.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Tara. I make comics. I feel like I'm confessing. I have a graphic novel called This Is Not a Pipe that came out from Te Heranga Waka Press, formerly known as Victoria University Press, in 2020. This is me counting in my mind. It's like that time. It's like that when people ask you what your birth date is, and you're like, "Do I really know my birth date? I'm going to seem like I'm drunk." I don't drink. Oh my goodness! I am absolutely rambling. I also do some live drawing stuff at various literary events, and I have a webcomic called Book Dragons, which is getting towards its end, where I put up a page a week.
All three of you represent a new generation of artists who are working across different formats and genres. Mary, you work in both comics and games, and your Lonely Artist series talks about the next iteration being a hybrid of the two. Is that something that feels natural to you?
Yeah, it's totally natural because I am really into comic when I was 6, so the comic was all through my life. And I'm into drawing because of comics, but I wasn't really imagining I'm being a comic artist, but I always wanted to draw. I think, being a game artist or being an animation artist, what I wanted to do, or illustrator, what I want to do is trying to find some story in all those platforms, to tell story in either it's concept design, or it's illustration, or it's game and comic. But so because I like so many different stuffs, but the comic is one thing I could actually do by myself. Not exactly, because I still need a lot of people help printing, promoting online or making the story, legit or whatever. But I have a lot of different hobbies and abilities. I really wanted to combine them into comic, making that a little bit more interesting, more exciting, or more can be get to more people. For example, if you post comic online, that will be totally different from what you draw on the paper. Or if it's just a lot of different things that you can do to experiment, especially if I'm not doing comic as a job, which means I have more place I can actually to see what I can do, not thinking about how much money or how much energy, those kind of things, because that will be a totally different approach.
Yeah, pretty similar to me actually. Definitely the thing that draws my interest towards comics and has always drawn me towards comics is the love of telling stories and really wanting to share these stories that I've always had in a format that again I can do by myself. So in order to create something that's visual and tells a story, the most efficient way to do that, especially for longer format stories, is in a comic format. I grew up loving picture books a lot as a kid, especially sort of like adult picture books, like the stuff that Sean Tan has produced was like a huge influence on my little teen artistic career. And so when I was sort of coming into my own, I was very inspired by video games, very inspired by animation and all of these other channels. If I talk through what it is that I really love, probably about 80% of that would be media other than comics. And so it's actually the format of comics isn't necessarily something that I was super connected into in my childhood as much, although I did have like their standard Asterix and like Tintin around as a kid, but very much the producing it's so much easier, and you get so much further in a comic format than you could with, say, trying to produce indie animation, where you'd get a second for the same amount of effort as you could get like literally a month's worth of comics.
Yeah, you control, like, you get to be the director and the
you're the whole
producer.
Team in a
Low budget.
Yeah, low budget. Not low effort though.
Yeah, totally.
Oh my goodness, if you want something redrawn. Yeah. I loved Calvin and Hobbes as a kid. So I loved comic strips, and so I think I always I gravitate to a sort of episodic style in the things that I make, and like really like, although I am doing a long form story, but it's made up of tiny little chunks. Like, I'm always thinking about things in terms of what is this page a whole complete thing? So I think in terms of pages, or I think in terms of strips, and then they all add up in this kind of like sort of repeating iterative manner to create a narrative. So I think maybe interested in people talking, like some people are like, oh, should it be a comic if it's just talking heads? I'm like, but that's it's kind of what I'm interested in. Although at the moment I'm trying to work on action, and I have been experimenting with where can you make a poem which is a comic, and like where do the words end and where do the pictures start, and that sort of kind of structural format stuff. But yeah, at least with a comic you do the whole thing, right? And that means it can get made.
It seems like all of you are kind of interested in where those edges are with comics. Do you enjoy kind of being up against the edges? Do you feel like you're up against the edges?
I don't feel like it's enough, but I'm always thinking and listening and looking at what other people do. But essentially, you wanted to make a good story, and you have to draw, you have to write. It's a huge amount of work. No matter what platform you do, it's a big effort. So the other things like going to the edges, or different platforms or different way of promoting, that's all good. But combine all of those, they are a lot of work need to put into. So yeah, I really wanted to, because I think it's interesting that comic now become you have to sit down and read. Now you can't just watch. So really want to know how to make more people who are not into comic. So you're gonna have to find some different ways. Like I do Wellington stuff, and the Wellington people, they might not interested, but everyone can read it. So if they're interested in Wellington cafes, Wellington people's life, they will read it. So it's like finding different ways to drag people into a different platform. They're not only looking at the screen or like animation, but they can read something, which is also exciting. Yeah. So I think I haven't really explored all the ages. Yeah.
And you're thinking about audience.
I'm totally thinking about audience.
Yeah, I think the thing that I find really interesting about having done a lot of work within webcomics is the way that webcomics have really changed across the last 20 years. Like, you think about how it still feels like a really fresh and new space to be operating in, but it's like already so evolved compared to where it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. and it's developing its own language, I think, especially that we're sort of seeing emerge, and it's really exciting to be, I guess, a part of that. Working in like a scroll format that's designed to be consumed on a mobile phone device over a typical screen style device of like a laptop or any other kind of like computer screen has completely changed the entire way and the audience demographics of people who are engaging with comics, which I think is really it's really inspiring, and the numbers are speaking for themselves essentially in terms of this is the space where people are gravitating towards because you've got your phone on you all the time. So if you get a notification update that the comic that you've been really enjoying is updated, you will spend time to invest within that property because it's already a part of your daily routine. And I think, you know, if book publishers could get you a book just like to magically notify itself when a new one was out, I think we'd all be in that. We'd all want to be in that kind of the same boat. So yeah, I think there's
go back to that Dickensian thing where it's like chapters.
Yeah. So I think there's interest in this kind of going back to this chapter approach, which isn't new to webcomics, and it's not new to this current format. It is something that's how we used to distribute novels, right? So there is a certain value in having that serialization become popular again within these spaces, especially within narrative stuff, because it's all, obviously serialization for strip comics has not gone away ever, but moving, graphic novels also have took such a big chunk of that market, and then you had like monthly sort of floppy issue, comic stuff, which is not really my environment so much, but moving towards this space, this very much feels like where I built my home in terms of like, this is the internet that I grew up on, making these sorts of webcomics. And so, so watching it develop, watching it evolve with the current generation of technology and seeing what kinds of stories you can tell with that technology is to me, it's really interesting. I think there's just something really special about going through a scroll comic, and you've got sort of panel, and the characters are having a conversation, and then you get to a moment that the writer really wants to draw you into, and you get this like beautiful big long scrolling effect that you just can't have in any other format, and you really kind of fall into the image and can really get absorbed into the narrative in a way that you can't on the page, because you're not actually pulling yourself along through it in that same kind of a way.
It controls the pace of the reading in a way that a comic, like, because a comic page, you see the whole page at once, and then you will depending on how you read or how you approach it, well, you might go in and spend a lot of time. Some people just read the words and skim over the pictures, whatever, but that scrolling format.
Yeah. So you can use the amount of space between panels to tell story too, which I always love, even in print format. Like, I think, play with gutters. It's a great place to actually tell story. I think this is like a really interesting part of what is coming with comics these days. Yeah,
that's cool.
I can talk for a really long time about this.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I am doing a webcomic, but I'm not doing that kind of webcomic. And the reason I'm doing a webcomic is actually more to just make myself do it, right? Like, so I want to be making the story, and how can I do it in a manageable way when I have a day job? And the way is by setting myself a goal of a page a week. And then you're like, okay, so that is something I can do, and that is something that I can hold myself to. And whether people are reading it or not is not necessarily the biggest thing. The biggest thing is actually the work itself. So, if I've changed, like when you're doing a story page by page over a 3-year period, and trying to hold it together in your head, things are gonna change. You're a different person than when you started, for sure. It's not being banged out. I don't know. I don't really know what I'm saying or what I'm doing, but yeah, it used to be that you could start a webcomic, and if you were okay, if you're okay, you get a huge following, but there's a way more competition at the moment.
There's more competition, but there's also more readers. And I think something else that's quite and there's more kind of interest in the format. I think I think there's no such thing really as a zero-sum game within this. I think more comics is more comics, and the more specific you are, hopefully the more people that you'll find that have that same kind of thing that they're wanting what it is that you're laying down. The other thing I really love about webcomics, and I think this is true, this is true now as it used to be, is that you change over time, and your art changes over time, and you develop a stronger sense of who your characters are. Your style will shift, and it's really cool to follow an artist or be that artist and see how your work changes with you over time. And I think that's something that I've always really loved about webcomics, is that the audience is embracing of style change over time. They don't expect the first page to look like the most recent page.
Like Gannacrid Court.
Yeah. You want it to change over time. You're like, look where you were, and now you're over here, and it's barely recognizable.
Although I felt like with something like Gannacrid Court, the story was always top notch. But his art has come a long way. Whereas something like questionable content, which I also love, I can't read those early strips. What he was doing 20 years ago is no longer what he's doing now. He was making jokes about bands.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing about webcomic is just the font still kind of too small. It's like me, I was reading comic was 6. We used to have a type of comic that combined 4 pages into 1 page. I almost feel like the phone was like that. So I just don't know how you guys are reading comic on the phone. You don't think that's too small?
Well, this is the thing with the webtoon format, is it's designed to read it more or less a panel or a panel and a half at a time. So the font size is bigger, the text is bigger, and the images are all bigger. So you can read it much more easily on a phone because you're not looking at the whole page at once.
So it's almost panel by panel. It's like Instagram or any kinds of social media.
Yeah, it feels more like that. Yeah, except you sort of scroll through, so you reveal the story as you go. Yeah.
I went through a phase of reading some stuff on Comixology, and that worked for me fine. Where it was it sort of went like this.
Oh yes, it's like a little camera moving through.
But I got locked out of my Comixology account some time ago, and I have no idea what's happened with it, and I just didn't go back. But those comics I was talking about before, Questionable Content and Gannacrid Court, they are actually more traditional, book page looking format, and I read them on my computer. I don't read them on my phone because you're right, my phone is too small.
Yeah, it just depends on if you're creating the comic for the platform, you do panel by panel. But some comics, they have beautiful environments and beautiful illustrations, not only people talking. Then those things, if you look at the phone, then you just see piece by pieces. It's a little bit, it's like you creating the comic for the platform. Then the comic has to be like that. So it's a little bit limited.
It's not. I don't think it's limited. It's just a different set of requirements.
Yeah.
And I don't think it can just be the stuff that I really love on Webtoon isn't just the stuff with characters talking to each other. It's also you get these beautiful I guess it's instead of a horizontal pan like you'd get in a double page spread, it's like a vertical pan. So you're slicing things in this vertical pattern rather than in a horizontal one.
Yeah. I think of them as splash panels.
Yeah.
So but they're these thin, cool. But then also sometimes people can be moving through them, so they can give a sort of faux animation kind of thing going on.
That kind of thing. Or some of the cool ones that I've seen recently have them recessed into the panel as well. So they create this sense of depth through the page, which is super cool.
It's between comic and animation. Between.
Some of them have music, so they specially commission musicians to write them tracks.
I suppose it's no different from what Toby Morris in some ways is doing, because his comics will sometimes have the GIFs embedded, and so you'll have the person who's being interviewed, but you'll just have them blinking at you, or the K-shaped recovery, where the people are scooting. So I guess I that's more in the non-fiction kind of commercial.
So science comms stuff.
Yeah, science comms realm. Yeah.
Which science comms is like really taken to comics. I don't know if that's just a New Zealand thing because we've been very lucky to have good comic artists be drawn into really good science communicators, but it's really been an interesting field.
And Mary, with your Wellington coffee shop, one of your ways of drawing an audience in was to ask people's coffee shop memories. Can you talk a little bit about that project?
That's just something I thought I can do because I want to go to a Chroma festival, a ChromaCon, and I don't have anything. I thought, what can I do? I wanted to make like a small book or stuff for sale, but then I don't know what to draw, and I saw Wellington coffee shop. It's kind of cute, interesting. So I just started do it, and people really likes it. I think that my motivation is come from people saying it's great. I want more people buying prints of it. Essentially, I'm just gonna sell prints, not the book. I only print like 30 pages, but it's just because it's my own project, right? So I'm just a little bit craving of more story. And you can draw a illustration hint for a story inside. But I still feel like people are so loving it. For what reason? They definitely have memories and stuff in the coffee shop. Then they say, oh my God, it's making me cry because I was there with my boyfriend, whatever, ex-boyfriend. There, we meet here, we did something. So then I feel like maybe we can, because I have already, that's the thing, I already have some certain audience online who would buy my stuff, and they are Wellingtonians and they love coffee shops. So I say, okay, maybe I can do some like zines and stuff, but just related to a Wellington coffee shop story. So that's why I just ask people to give me, because I don't want to draw my own story. I have a little bit, but I wanted to like having some more exciting things come to me, and I can make them into comic, and people will. I hope people will feel a little bit more engaged by those kind of comics, because this is me interpretation of their life. Also, it's an animal, right? So it can be anything. You feel like you crocodile, you're crocodile. That's how I did for animals. Yeah.
Jem, your experience of Circuits and Veins, I feel like the audience just ran with that.
Yeah, no, it was really interesting publishing it online and seeing the audience really kind of like, I guess, like grow up around the story. It's definitely been the most popular thing that I've ever created, and really interesting just to watch people, I guess, like fall in love with the characters as much as I had, and really be invested in the story as I was telling it. Was I don't know, it's a very interesting thing to be telling a story to an audience who's also telling you how they're feeling about it as you go. And that can be, both a blessing and a curse.
Did you feel pressure?
I did feel a little bit of pressure, and then there's, especially because the webtoon audience does skew a little bit younger, and so because I was telling a story that didn't have very clear, it was a little bit morally grey in places, there wasn't clear black and white, it wasn't always like the characters were going to communicate really clearly with each other. So one character would keep a little bit of a secret from the other one, and then you'd get the comments that were like, she's terrible, oh my God, like they shouldn't be together at all. And then they'd talk it out and they'd make it up and they'd be like, this is such a healthy relationship, this is goals. And I'm like, it's the same character. Like, it's just you like it when they make up and you don't like it when they are and they're mad at each other. But you can't make up if you never get mad. So I think it is a lesson of, I guess, I can't necessarily create or respond to what the audience are picking up, because it's not always good. It's not always good to build a story on that, but is a good way to get, I guess, indicate whether or not my main themes are landing. And actually sometimes people being annoyed or pissed off is a good way to tell, actually, this is where I want them to be. Like, I want you to be frustrated that these secrets being kept. That's how you should feel, because it's a secret and it's being kept in a way that you don't want it to be. Stuff's not great sometimes.
Yeah.
It's part of the arc of storytelling. Very much so.
Making your characters unlikable as well.
I don't feel like they were unlikable, but I do feel like there's a lot of pressure on on like femme characters, like characters people perceive as women within comics to be a certain personality and archetype. And so if you show characters annoyed, if you show them angry, if you show them defensive of themselves, and this character is perceived to be like a girl or a woman, they get a lot more pushback, even in girls' spaces. They're like, oh, I don't like her, she's too bossy, she's mean, I don't want anything to do with it. And I'm like, wow, I'm just writing a character that is like just experiencing frustration and being vocal about it.
Love that internalized misogyny that we got going on. Structural, even in narrative.
Yeah, or comments responding to narrative. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's good for to tell stories the way that I want. Like I'm always going to write angry women because I like angry women. Maybe I am one a little bit, but it's valuable. Like anger is a useful emotion.
I feel like that's a really good segue to Beth.
Oh yes, but it isn't the thing with Beth is that she just like Beth is the main character in This Is Not a Pipe, but her main thing is that she just endures. Like she I had this conversation with my editor at one point where she was like, oh, I'm like wondering if she should have an expression on her face when Kenneth says that thing. And I'm like, no, like, because she's just like, it's just another thing. like her learned reaction is no reaction. Like she has to ride this thing through, like, and she thinks it's her fault anyway. So, yeah. So why anger? Do you think Beth is secretly really angry?
Well, I just think there's quite a juxtaposition between Jem's characters that are very forthright and able to express their emotions, and Beth, as you say, is enduring quite a lot without necessarily expressing what maybe might be going on. And there's lots of people expressing around her at every moment.
Yeah, people are whispering in the backgrounds. That's another thing that you can do with comics. You're like, you don't actually have any idea whether that person heard or not. Whereas, like, I sometimes feel like in film when people are whispering in the backgrounds, you're like, that person can definitely hear you. But, like, there's no, like, you don't, like in a comic, you don't know how loud they actually are. And, like, sometimes you can make the words bigger to make it seem like they're shouting. But, like, it's a little bit, the actual quality of the sound is way more ambiguous. You don't know what their accent is unless someone's decided to write it in a dialect.
And you've had some quite strong feedback about the character of Kenneth as well.
People hate Kenneth. And I think that's fair. Like, I don't really want to be a Kenneth apologist, except I do kind of, like, because, like, I don't know, he has kindness and he thinks he's being a good guy and he thinks he's doing the right thing, and he's not. And don't we all think we're doing the right thing, and sometimes we're not? Like, I don't know. I have a lot of sympathy for that. It doesn't mean I'm going to excuse the fact that he has problems. Yeah, and then there's also the thing where, like, what your audience take from it is allowed to be what your audience take from it. Like, people thinking that this character has absolutely no redeeming qualities. Well, actually, that's okay. Like, if if that is how that a person reads the book, I don't feel like I can really say that that's wrong. Like, that they've read the book wrong. I hope there's enough room for them to have that. And maybe if they read it at a different time in their life, they'll feel differently about it. I mean, that would be a really great thing.
You mentioned Chronicon before, and I wonder about the role of audience interaction and also making the physical items of comics, whether that's for Chronicon or Zine Fests.
It's because I think, like, we work full time for other stuff, so you have to, sometimes you have to have a motivation to, do your own stuff. And the deadline is the best thing you can have. If you are signed for a table saying, I'm going to bring this and this, and then you got 4 months, then you got to do it. So, yeah, so I think those things are actually helping me to make a lot of zines. I think this the three of them, the Lonely Artists, the Wellington coffee shops, and the zine, is all for zine or chroma. But two of them didn't really. I can't bring them to the zine because of COVID.
Yeah, oh my goodness, Zine Fest has been cancelled. Like,
That's sad.
basically 2021 Zine Fest Wellington didn't happen.
ComicFest and Zine Fest.
Yeah.
It was a sad year last year for
Yeah.
comics. in
Yeah, it was really sad, and I feel like we got a couple of literary festivals as well, but then like this year has actually been a desert.
Wellington.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can understand not wanting to plan anything in this environment. Yeah, I think it's a whole, like, tabling is a whole skill in and of itself in terms of what it is you bring, how much you make, what kind of format it's in, and then also like how you set it up and how you interact with people on the day. Like, this is all it's all a different skill set to sitting at home and making comics, and so this is kind of the thing with comics is, I think, as well as being the director, the artist, the writer, the producer, and all of this, you're also the marketing team. You're also the social media person. You're also the manager. So you have to, and the finance team. So you have to sit there and think, if I want this, not even as a career, but if I just want my work to be visible in front of other people, what strategies am I going to be using to do that? How am I going to get my work into the hands of other people? And festivals like ChromaCon especially, which has such a focus on drawing out incredible New Zealand talent and really putting it all on display in a way that I think is incredibly unique. And like Alan and the team behind ChromaCon have done just such an incredible job to really lift and connect the New Zealand artist scene in a way that I don't think we really were before. I remember that first one being like, who are any of these people? How are we all here? How are we all this amazing? Like, I was just like, who knew that we had this many world-class creators literally sitting around in this kind of a space? And, that feeling has really grown through that whole thing. So I think, as well as connecting into audience, which is obviously why you go to table, to hopefully make at least your table value back and make some new fans, the other reason is that it connects you in with other creative people who are also making work, who you get to actually see your peers and sit down with them and have those stories and connections, because God dang it, we are all a bunch of introverts at the best of times, and I think it can be quite hard to take our work hats off from our regular jobs and then our comic jobs and then hang out on top of that, like. Yeah. So, forced socialization, forced networking time is kind of something that I feel like more of us need than we.
So much commerce though as well. As you were saying, you're selling a lot of prints and those kind of things, and I'm just like, I just don't think that the idea of me, I don't consider myself an illustrator, so that like the idea of me trying to put together like some sort of one-off picture that people would buy, I can't. I feel like I would break my own heart, so I just don't do it. I'm like, you can just not buy my comics, but if you didn't buy like a print that I made, I'm making art that you don't want to take away. Anyway,
it's a different level of investment, like personal investment.
I don't know. I'm just a weirdo. I'm just like, I want to sell comics. I want to sell prints. Yeah. Like, it's not like my drawings are not really that pretty either. Like, they're just, I think of them as a functional thing.
That's an interesting thing between ComicCon and ComicFest or Zine Fest. Because I want to also be legit to go to Zine Fest, that I'm started making comic strip of Lonely Artists, because I don't want to go there to sell my prints only, because it's about telling stories using zines, right? So that's kind of a bit off track. But ComicCon is, I guess you can do anything, It's as long as you express yourself in a creative way, it's all good. And like you said, I think that those festivals really like, it's not as festival we come to hang out. It's like to get some energy back, because you're so focused on sitting your table, fucking without talking anything, alright, for a long time. And now you can see so many people similar as you. They have so many things to tell, but they're also very lonely. So I really hope those things can come back sometime. Yeah.
Are there other places that you go to find connections within comics communities?
Discord.
Yeah. Some Facebook groups. I was in some New Zealand comic Facebook groups and some illustrator Facebook groups. But I generally feel like comic artists are more introverted than illustrator. I'm not sure because I'm probably not in that kind of group too much. So I don't feel people engage with each other too much. And I don't use Discord, so
yeah. I have a very nice little private Discord server that I'm a member of, and we all make comics, and then there's a little sort of channel at the bottom where we all will just like we won't talk, no talking, no listening, and we'll just stream what we're working on, like our comic panels together. So it's like a water cooler, like working chat, and you can see like what other people are working on while you're working, and it's very nice.
So you're like actually you've created your own little community, like of work. Yeah,
and you know we're all scattered all around the world. So so there's me in New Zealand. It's like I'm online when the Insomniac people who live on in America are online, and then you can kind of like then sort of the Europeans wake up and go to sleep. It's quite cute that there's usually someone in there who's got their stream going, who's just like sketching away on something. So it's a nice wee vibe, and I wish I could like replicate it for more spaces so that because I just think it's a really nice way to stay connected as an artist.
It's a nice companionable thing to know that other people are just working. Yeah,
it's like we're all working, so let's all quietly work in the same space together. Especially being scattered around, especially with like the pandemic, meaning that we can't actually organise a meetup even if we could travel. So that's yeah.
Yeah, I applied for there's a Comics Australia workshop thing, and then they organised for people who weren't accepted to the workshop, which didn't even happen because of COVID. They organised an online group for them, which is still kind of getting off the ground, which is sort of kind of a similar thing where you're just like, we're try and have a plan to like check in on people's work or give each other feedback, which is quite cool. But those things are only they only work if other people are committed as well. Like you only get anything from them if you can have everybody is really wanting that same thing.
or like at least like a critical mass of engagement, right? Like you can't have a community as one person, and you have to have a certain amount of people engaging in the space in order for it to be worthwhile participating.
Yeah, like I put the Discord on my phone, but then I turned off all the notifications and then forgot about it. Like that's not a thing, Yeah.
I don't want to connect to like 24/7, but that's why I think I prefer like meetups and stuff, just in person. Like a few people who love comic or love drawing or love illustrating the business, so we can talk once a week, once a month. But I don't want it to check what people are doing like for a few hours a day. Then what I'm gonna do? It's hard. But now you can only get online, so it's a lot of things.
You've all got quite different styles and stuff, and we're talking about all these different media. So what tech do you all use, and why do you use that tech? Because there's so many options out there.
I use the iPad, and I use Clip Studio Paint, and pretty much exclusively now. I don't really use I have a very nice Cintiq, but I don't use it. I live and work on my iPad, and that's been the way for. I bought it just so that I could have something to sketch in while I was out and about, and then slowly it overtook more and more of my process until it's pretty much the whole thing, and now it's just iPad. So same.
Me as well, but I just use Procreate because I only do sketches. But I feel like I recommend it because it's so so easy. Look at, I have so many different folders. One is comic, right? So I have lots of, for example, I just draw this kind of thing on them, and then I'll export them into Photoshop, but still do on the computer, just because I use Photoshop for my whole life. Just much easier. But I think lots of comic artists use Clip Studio because they have so many effects and special design for comics.
Clip Studio's it's really great for formatting comics. There's a lot of shortcuts and different things you can use in order to be able to really streamline your workflow down. And when you're making 60 panel weekly updates to your webcomic, you need to be able to have those shortcuts to hand. So there's a bunch of like the way that the fill tools work, the way that you can use like vector layers for your line art, so you can actually like completely resize your line art without losing any of the digital quality. Is like just amazing. And all of the brushes, like there's a huge like selection of like creator uploaded assets that you can go and download. So if you want it to feel like a watercolor, if you want it to feel like an oil painting, you can find someone else who's already made a really good watercolor brush set or a really good oil painting brush set. You can get those effects and feelings into your work. And then also the other assets as well. Like there was actually a bunch of like Japanese creators who just upload like black and white background assets. So you don't even have to draw your own backgrounds. You can just use the ones that are being provided, like to be used in this way, so that you can actually cut that whole part of your process out in order to be able to focus in on the bit that you're actually doing. Which, if you were in an animation, if you were in directing, like you would only be providing like the character art or other kinds of components. And manga creation, it's very common for the background artist to be a specialized job, not necessarily the one that the lead artist would do.
Yeah. But we're the lead artist and the background artist.
Yeah, and the thumbnailer and the letterer and the inker and the colorist.
The pool seller.
I use pen and paper. I draw thumbnail sketches. Let's find. I wrote thumbnail sketches in a 1B8, and then I redraw things. Oh, sometimes they're actually thumbnails, but sometimes they're more like a whole the actual size page. And then I draw them in light blue pencil, and then I use a Tombow, and then I scan it into my computer, and I do a little bit of cleanup with like not even a Cintiq, like a Wacom, and I do that on Photoshop.
Do any of you do the reverse of working analog, or Tara working digitally?
I buy a lot of art supplies that I do not use. I'm like, ooh, I need a new ink. I need a new brush. I don't need things. I should use what I have. Yeah, and I am like, oh, Copics, like, buying like a really nice marker set, some really nice paper, and I buy them and I'll use them like once and maybe 1.5 times, and then I'll just like put that stuff away and not really use it, because I will draw something and then I'll try and like resize it or like try and like erase it. I can't like resize it, and I'm like, okay. I have caught myself like drawing something and then gone to like tap my paper because I've got like undo set to undo, and it's like it's not going to do it. Or zoom, and then it's like then smudge it. So.
Opposite's magic.
It's like, no, this is how you zoom. This is the zoom.
Yeah. I'm very, very lucky. My mother loves art stuff, and so when I go to visit her, I get to play with her art supplies, and sometimes she'll loan them to me even, like, so I can do some watercolor painting and various other things.
I think there has always been a movement within digital art to replicate traditional brush textures as close as possible, and I think there's always been work that's been able to do it pretty good across time. Like over time, the engines have gotten more advanced, the brush strokes have gotten more easy to replicate. The textures have gotten more natural feeling because the ability to I guess mimic this the sort of analogness, the randomness of brush strokes is getting more advanced. I think also I've personally just gotten more comfortable with the specific ones that I have been using to replicate sort of ink marks in a way that feels good for me. Probably better than not better than what I could do if I was using real ink, but like I don't end my drawing sessions with my hands covered in graphite and ink every day, which is I would otherwise just probably constantly be stained in ink. So yeah, I think especially programs like Procreate, which I don't actually use very much, is very much designed to mimic the blending and qualities of sort of more traditional kind of style stuff. And yeah, and there's people who pretty much they specialize as brush designers now. Like that's their job, is that they instead of making, I mean, they're still artists and illustrators, but they kind of spec into brush design, kind of the same way that a graphic designer might specialize in typography. And so you get this whole new emerging field of like people who make brushes and then distribute those brushes as a way to kind of to share that with their audience. Like that's their marketable asset.
Any tips to emerging comic artists?
You know, if you want to make comics. However you can do that. If like you don't have access to like fancy things, then like pen and paper does do it. Like and a lot of people start by making comics for their friends, because that's where you can get that immediate feedback and that immediate audience, and if they're liking what you're doing, then maybe you will continue. My advice is don't start too big. Like your huge fantasy epic, which starts at the dawn of time, like that's too big a project for your first one. You'll need to build some skills first.
Yeah, I think the thing that I think is a good thing if you're starting a comic project and you're not sure really whether or not the subject that you've got is the one that you want to continue on, I guess think, how will I feel putting this down? And if your big fantasy epic is the thing that you've got your heart set on so tightly that you're like, if I stop this, I will be so heartbroken, then probably it's not the project to start with. I think a good project to start with is something that you would be happy to stop, because that allows you the space to experiment.
Yeah, because comics take time.
They take time. They take effort to know. Like we've been saying with the fact that you are all of these roles. That means you have to learn what all those roles are. Like you have to learn how it is that these pieces fit together. So I mean, you can start with a big fantasy epic as long as you're happy to put it on hold again. Like I have some friends who are working on stories that are finally being published now in a format that they're happy with, that they have restarted 15 times since they were 15. And that's what's worked for them, because they know that even if they're happy to stop it and restart it again and reformat it, because these characters they just love so deeply that that's what they're committed to. I think it's very much like start something you're willing to stop. And so if that's something, maybe if you start something very small, you don't need to stop it because you finish it, and so then you've got a finished thing that you can then publish as a zine, share as Instagram stories, publish it to Webtoon, and start to build readers if that's a part of something that's important to you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if you wanted to do something and you are like a starter or just want to get into it, then you do a short version of what you really want to do. Like if you want to have a Harry Potter fantasy, then do a 20-page to try it out, to go to the Zine Fest and see audience like reactions, or you put it online and you share with your friends and see what they tell you, like what they like or what they don't like. And I feel if you're young, you probably should try a lot of different things as well, not only comic. You can do comic do it right now, but you can also take commissions, do graphic design, bring a barista, whatever.
I mean, you can do graphic design. I can't do graphic design.
But I mean, to try something a little bit related but different, just because I think being a comic artist in New Zealand is kind of hard. And I think you love comic, but you don't want to drive yourself into a desperate situation. And you will love a lot of different things, and it would help you making comics as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
And welcome back to the studio, and we're going to very shortly have a quick Q&A with some of the panelists from that particularly bit. Quick shout out to our sponsors first, which are Unity Books, Graphic Press, and Gecko Press. And if you've got any questions for the panelists, please get in touch with us. Go to slido.com, and the password is ComicFest NZ. So hopefully on the line, we actually have quite a few questions already. We have me. Oh, hello,
Yeah, here you
hello,
all are.
welcome.
Mary Guo and Jem Yoshioka and Tara Black. And I'm so pleased our technology works.
Yay!
Woo!
Great to have you
I'm
all.
not sure my sound well.
And we've already had quite a few questions. So I think, Sam, you've got going to kick off with some.
Yes. Okay. So the first one is to Mary, and it says it's from an anonymous person. How do you choose what animals to use to represent people? Are they international species to make sure that comics appeal to readers outside of New Zealand?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess if I only make animals in New Zealand, we all gonna be birds, right? So no, I think it's totally probably related, but I don't want it to make it very, because you using animal also can have a stereotype of animal. If I'm from China, I'm a panda, but I don't want it to be like that. But yeah, you have to think about little bit representations, and not only nationalities, but like how they look, what the animal behave usually in the wild, or it's a dog. It's different personality, because I believe animal also have personalities and stuff. Not human, but so you think about all those and how they look, how you think about like if they are they like really strong, or they really cute, or they look wacky. So those things come to play, but not exactly they have to come from a certain continent to present a certain people. No, but I think about the look and the feeling of this animal more than where they come from.
Do you have a specific animal that you like to draw the most? I know that you draw yourself as a specific animal.
I probably like to draw honey badger more than otter, because this is two of my comic main characters. But otter was just too like shine, but honey badger always like angry, and his angry face is actually a neighborhood cat. So I was reference him to a neighborhood cat. The cat had a really strong attitude. It's my best friend in the neighborhood, but his attitude, I love it. And I'm always looking at his face. He was like this. So I put that into honey badger. So I think honey badger is my favorite character to draw. The attitude is important.
Yeah, it comes through. We've got your comic up here, Lonely Artist.
Oh, thanks.
Which is fabulous. Tara, we've got a question in for you as well. It says, to Tara, with your long-running comics, are you ever tempted to go back and change something that you did ages ago, or is it maybe more interesting to work around it?
Well, with Book Dragons, I do want to redraw the earlier pages because I changed the format halfway through. But the actual story, I've tried to keep that not contradicting itself. There is a bit early on where Kaya speaks in Te Reo Māori, and actually she uses the wrong syntax. She uses or category rather than a category, and I would like to change that, although I guess she doesn't know quite what she's saying, so I guess it's also maybe true to herself that she wouldn't quite know, but like an audience maybe wouldn't get that subtlety, and it would just be wrong. So there are things like that.
Awesome. Jem, out of all of your comics, which of your original characters has been the most fun to draw for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I always try and make my characters fun and interesting to draw because I'm going to be drawing a lot of them. I have to say, in my most recent series, I really like drawing Peach, who is a tanuki. So she has a lot of personality and character. But I think the thing that I really enjoy is like watching the dynamics develop between characters and like what kind of relationship they have with each other. So that's been something I've been really enjoying, not just like a single character, but actually how the relationship between them plays out has been really fun.
It's great. We've got loads and loads of questions coming in. So if anybody's got questions, keep them coming. But I've got one for all of you, and it's anonymous. How do you create the separation between paid creative work and your own projects for yourself? And the second part to the question, do you have any tips about how to make time to be able to do that? Mary, do you want to start first?
How do I separate creative work and my own work?
Yes, I think it's like, I think somebody's like, if it's a commission piece against something you've got a real burning passion to do, how would you go about balancing the two?
It's well, I mean, my job is to create, concepts and stuff. So it's always I'm always thinking about what clients essentially want. So when I'm creating my own stuff, so I also thinking similar way, but I can put more time into my own art, and I can be more experimental. Like I know what people like, but I want to do this and that because that's what I want to see if I can do. But for commercial work, sometimes the time is limited, so I can't do this. And sometimes I can't give them an experimental piece just because I wanted to. So I need to make sure it looks the best to suit the thing. But essentially, I think my way of doing those things are similar, just because they all just a creative process, Yeah.
And Tara, you're there drawing as we speak, so you're creating time when you're alive.
Cool.
But I don't get paid for this. This is just, yeah. I have rules about this generally, is that it has to be done in the time that it's happening. I try not to like record things and go back and do them, because then they blow out and I had a bit of a problem with some of the it wasn't Auckland Writers Festival, New Zealand Festival of the Arts. They had some online things, and I was so tempted to pause those because they were sort of pre-recorded. But then I would have been there all day. I never would have finished.
So it's good you just do them as they come up, as people say things, and if you miss things, you miss things.
Yeah, and spelling mistakes. I do fix spelling mistakes if I notice them.
How about for you, Jem?
So for me, I am in a situation where I have sort of stable full-time work outside of comics, and that's actually worked really well for me to not have to worry about where it is that my paycheck is coming from. And it also lets me have a very clear delineation between the work that I'm doing creatively and the work that I'm paid to do. Occasionally I do still take on like commissioned clients for other sorts of stuff. And so I find that having actually a strong comms background actually helps a lot with commission work in terms of being able to communicate and deal with clients. And then for personal stuff, again, I guess similar to Mary, is that I can just bring more of myself to it. I'm not having to try and fit a specific brief. I can develop the brief for myself, which sometimes it can be a little bit daunting if you're in a creative space or dealing with like some, some artist block or some burnout to know what it is that you might want to do. I find actually setting myself some like a creative brief like I would for a client can sometimes be a good way to get over that. So, only using, creating a series of artworks around a specific theme or using specific color palettes can be like a fun way to give myself that creative challenge without feeling like I had to create a certain anything for a certain person.
Oh, that's really clever. I haven't heard
Yeah.
of people doing that before. I love that.
Yeah, that's great. We've got another question in from somebody called Alan, and then this a question for everyone. What is the biggest reason to convince you to start on a longer comic project? The second part to it, and just as important, how do you know when to end a comic project? Would you like to kick that one off, Jem?
Yeah, sure. So it's a very good question. I think comic project is very much, how long is a piece of string? Can be any length. I've found that when I was first getting into making comics, setting myself short comics as a structure was really good. So I would write very short scripts that were almost like poems, and then would create pieces around that would be the equivalent of about sort of 15 to 20 pages, like a single sort of issue was my brief around a specific theme. And then as I started to get back into longer form comic writing, I set myself a limit by writing the outline first. So I know how long it is I want it to be because I've written all of those story beats out ahead of time, like before I even start drawing anything. So I know where it is that I want things to go. And across the course of publishing, stuff does change. Certain plot points become more important. Certain characteristics become more apparent. The last part of the outline is always very vague, and I'm like, I'll work it out when I get there. And so then it sort of will tighten up towards the end. As to knowing like exactly where to end, I think you can kind of, if you're publishing online, you can use your audience's reactions to your work to gauge like exactly as you get closer to that end, exactly, what issue, what, chapter is going to be the final one based on how it is they're responding to the rest of the story. So yeah, I think it can be good to be like, actually, from the way that the comments that I'm getting, I feel like everyone's actually picked up enough of this and I can now wrap it up. But ending stuff is very hard, and it takes a lot of emotional work, I think, to really like put an end to something and be ready to say goodbye to it, especially for something that takes so long, like comics.
Is that something that you relate to too, Tara? Because you're coming to you're kind of in the third act of Book Dragons at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it feels like I've been at the end forever. And it just keeps not quite, like, characters they're not quite there yet. Like, it's just not, I mean, I know where I'm going, but like, just there keeps being some more swerves in the road, and I didn't write an outline first. So the reason the ending is hard is that you have to sort of come up with a way to solve the problems in a satisfying manner, in a way that doesn't contradict what's gone previously, but it's still like, I don't know, like not betraying your audience in some manner. Like, it was all a dream, which would be, the most stupid. I think there's an endurance thing to long form comics, and yeah, so the question, which was about like how do you start embarking on a long project, is I think Jem said in the panel interview that you sort of have to be willing to not finish. I don't know, like, because otherwise you might be hurting all of those people who've come halfway with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything to add to that, Mary, around long-term projects and how to kind of finish them?
Well, I haven't did a long-term project and finished it. I tried before and failed really badly. So I'm slowly getting into it because I do wanted to make it. So, but I'm still learning. I think it's more like prepare my mind to do it, because that's gonna be like a marathon. It's not, you're not just gonna run and feel good. You're gonna feel all sorts of feelings along the way and meet a lot of different situations. So I'm preparing my, mind to, but yeah, but I haven't done any successful long form comics. So I'm learning from you guys, I guess.
There's a related question from
Yes.
somebody called Leo, who's obviously keenly listened to this, and said, how do you keep up the love for long-term projects and characters without getting bored or overtired? I guess that's an interesting question. What do you do with a character if you suddenly, in the middle of doing something, get bored with them?
There's lots of ways to I guess keep interest in a really long-term, like a long-form project. And there's lots of different ways around this, but this is like a common problem, that you're sort of in the middle of something and it can get tiring. There's a whole lot of different things you can do to change up what you're doing though, like change some things around your workflow in order to try and sort of work out where in the process you're having the problems. Or change, like even like being like, I'm going to leave the house more and draw outside, not necessarily in the same spot. So having an iPad has been really helpful for me in that regard, to not feeling like I'm stuck in that position. If it's the character itself that is frustrating, the great thing about webcomics, especially really long form webcomics, is that your characters grow with you across the course of the series. So it's okay if you introduce little different ways that you want to render them. It's okay if you want to change what ink brush you're using. It's okay if you want to change the color palette that you're basing them on. It's okay if you want to have, like, potentially even change their outfit if that's something that they're going to do. That's definitely something that helps me stay interested, is I'll just put my characters in new clothes and then I've got something new to draw. Or change the location, change other things about them. If you're really, really stuck, you can always do a time skip and give everyone haircuts. So yeah, I think there's a lot of options. I think if you are in that situation, it is also okay to take a break if it's been a while and you're not financially relying on your comic to be your sole breadwinning opportunity. That is also an option.
Awesome. We've got time for one more question before we go to the next session. And this one, it says it's for Tara, but actually I think it applies to all of you, because I know that Mary, you got published as well last year, and Jem, you've got an agent and you're looking for publishing. What do you need to submit to a publisher the first time you contact them about getting your comics published? Says Alana.
It depends on who you're contacting. So some publishers will only take you through an agent, and it's really pays to read those kind of guidelines. If you want like the absolute ins and outs on this, I would recommend a podcast called Graphic Novel TK, which takes you through it. It's got a young adult children's comics focus. Adult comics and superhero comics are like a different thing entirely, and they tend to be like you would have to put together a portfolio to go to those kind of major art places. They don't tend to take artists who are also writers. But yeah, so read the submission guidelines. You may have to pitch to agents first. You might need an outline and some character sketches and 50 pages of script. I submitted to Heringa Waka University Press, and I submitted a full manuscript, which was finished, which is what they accept, only full things in. So, but it was up. Yeah, it's not. yeah, so finding someone to take your comic, which is for adults, is quite hard. It's I think it's a huge challenge, and so I'm really grateful to them for publishing me.
How about for you, Mary? How did your collaboration with Chroma come about?
Well, I mean, my situation is different because I actually did all those comics in for Zingfest. So I self-published, not published, I just print them and I actually stapled them, those comics myself for like 3 times. So then I got a whole 3 zines and they can be bundled into a book. Then I contact the Alan Shah, which is my publisher, and we talk about the deal. So it was a very small, like indie publishing scale. It's nothing too much for pitching and stuff. We just say, hey, I got this. Hey, are you interested? Okay, cool, do it. It's very like freestyle.
How about you, Jem? You're kind of working with a more international publishing agent. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I think the good thing to, I guess, ask yourself when you're looking into publishing is, what is publishing actually going to mean for you? Because there's not actually there's just as much money to be had by successfully publishing via webcomics potentially as there is within traditional publishing, and that's accessible to you right now. Like, you can go onto a platform like Webtoon or Tapas and you can begin publishing and building an audience now. So that would be what I would recommend. Number one thing to do is, if that gets you out the door, it gets your work in front of people. It means that when you then are taking that story to pitch to literary agents, you can already say that it comes with an audience. You can say that you've already built up this much of a following around your work. So my first comic, I didn't even take that to any literary agents or publishing agents at all, because I wanted to experiment with improving myself in the craft, getting a handle on what webcomics meant, and getting better at telling stories in a narrative format. So I just experimented, did it online. I found an audience of over 90,000 people for Circuits and Veins, which is pretty incredible. A lot more than I would have found if I had gone for a literary agent with that work first, because of the very niche subject matter, because I was an unknown artist. It would have been very hard sell. But I was then much easier to sell to an agent after I had successfully published something so big. I could then take my next project idea around to get that, because I've already sort of proven that there is an interest in the kinds of stories that I'm telling. So I would just remind you that traditional publishing is by far not your only option. I would also definitely recommend approaching someone like a literary agent, mainly because they do get paid when you secure a deal, which means that they are going to be like your biggest cheerleader and champion. It's a bit of a daunting process, but there's heaps and heaps of stuff online about how to approach them, especially for comics and graphic novels. The industry is a little bit weird and difficult to get used to, and I'm still getting used to it now, because I'm very much only dipping my toe in it at the moment. But I would say, if it's something that you're passionate about, if comics is something you're passionate about, definitely webcomics is not the secondary option. It is just as full of an option as any other way of publishing. And if your goal is to get your work in front of the most readers, webcomics will get you in front of more readers than print will, in most situations, and much easier. It's so much cheaper to do. Like, you've got self-publishing options via Kickstarter and things as well, but it's so prohibitively expensive, especially if you're trying to ship anything from New Zealand outside. So yeah, those are my tips.
Wonderful. Thank
Great
you to
advice.
the three of you. It's been lovely to chat, and I'm afraid that that's all we have time for. Thank you, everyone, for sending in
Thank
your
you very
questions.
much.
Thank you to the three of you for the chats and the live questions. And up next, we have Giselle Clarkson, who is talking to us about from commission to print, the wonderful poster that she did for ComicFest behind us. So we'll head on over to that now.